Welcome, everybody, to Buddhist Center. Sunday, talking about Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. We're in the section on the Four Noble Truths, so we're so fortunate to be able to find out exactly what our problem is when we look at why we haven't woken up yet, and what the cause of it is, and then how to get rid of the problem. And what is the problem? The problem is this dissatisfaction that we constantly have, this suffering that we have to have over and over and over again, and the lack of happiness in terms of the level of happiness that we have potentially, that we have from a day-to-day basis. And this is all coming from one very specific place when we look at the truth of origin in the Four Noble Truths, and that's the self-grasping ignorance, this kind of idea that the I and all phenomena are inherently existent. This thing fell down. And from that kind of idea, this misconception, we then exaggerate everything around us and then have afflictions arise, such as attachment, hatred, and ignorance, etc., jealousy, pride, etc. And then we act, and that action gives rise to various types of results in our future lives. And this is what we're talking about when we're looking at the various types of suffering in this, cyclic existence, in terms of the 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, and 3 types of suffering. We are seeing the kind of extent to which we have to undergo this process over and over and over again because of the fact that we've created causes for it to occur. And we've created causes for it to occur because we have these afflictions that gave rise to our actions. Then we have these afflictions because we exaggerate things, because we grasp at them as being truly existent in terms of person and in terms of phenomena. So it's so incredible that we're able to look at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment in this section on the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and have it ornamented with various other texts so that we can dive even deeper into what the meaning of it is, such as Pabunka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. And then once we really can see what these Four Noble Truths are all about, and truly see the predicament that we are in and all sentient beings are in, and then next, Lama Tsongkhapa talks to us about why this is occurring. I just said in a summarized way why it's occurring, but Lama Tsongkhapa gives in a very detailed way why this is all occurring, and then gives it in the most detailed way in terms of the 12 links of dependent origination, how we're bound to cyclic existence in terms of the forward order of the 12 links of dependent origination, how we continually, perpetually evolve through the 6 realms of cyclic existence, through these 12 links, beginning with ignorance. As we said, ignorance gives rise to all of this other stuff that then makes the wheel of cyclic existence within samsara go around and around and around. We turn like buckets on a water wheel, as Chandrakirti mentions in the beginning of the Madhyamika Avatara. And it's because of this we are bound to cyclic existence. And once we figure out how to reverse those 12 links, how to then pull away the ignorance, and once we get rid of the ignorance, we get rid of the karmas that the ignorance produces, those contaminated karmas, and then there's nothing being planted within the continuum that gives rise to a concordant result of negativity, because we've gotten rid of what gives rise to the contaminated actions. And once we figure out how to undo the ignorance at its most subtle level, the subtlest form of ignorance, the self-grasping ignorance, even if there are still karmas that could give rise to an effect, there's nothing to activate them. There's nothing to make them, kind of be produced into another form of cyclic existence. So even, if there isn't this grasping at the I, then there isn't anything to perpetuate the craving and grasping within the links and so forth that give rise to more and more rebirth. So we're lucky to be able to even start to look in what this means and could mean, how we're bound to cyclic existence. The Buddha identifies with the first 2 noble truths, and how we're unbound from cyclic existence, where Buddha identifies this within the 3rd and 4th noble truth. And then how this whole process works of being bound, we can know how to stay stuck. And then hopefully, once we find out about stuck, and what causes stuck, we won't want to stay stuck. And that's the whole point of identifying what the truth of suffering is, so that we look for something that actually works. We look for something better. We identify that that which is in cyclic existence is necessarily suffering. We stop seeking out things to make ourselves happy that don't really work. And the Buddha identifies why they don't work and makes it so clear to us why they don't work. So then we stop thinking salt water will quench us. And when we stop thinking salt water will quench us, we look to be quenched. And this is what this idea of renunciation is, this desire to definitely emerge from cyclic existence. It's this disenchantment with always being thirsty, because we're not really drinking that which would satiate us, that which would make us not thirsty. We're just drinking more salt water. And the Buddha identifies that. What is this salt water that we're drinking? We're chasing after contaminated happiness, this suffering of change that is like the bait that keeps us in the prison of cyclic existence. And no matter what, it will slowly transform into a form of suffering. It will decline in level of happiness. And that decline in level of happiness is loaded within all samsaric happiness. All samsaric pleasures are fraught with this negativity. Within the nature of samsaric pleasures, there's this suffering of change that's going to occur because of the fact that it's in a contaminated state of happiness. So when we look at feelings of pleasure and so forth, they're bound to change. And no matter what, no matter where we are in cyclic existence, even if we're in the highest peak of existence and have this meditative absorption that's almost an addiction to the state of a high state of meditation, unfortunately, that's not a permanent state. That's not a state that won't come to an end, because of the fact that the self-grasping ignorance hasn't been gotten rid of. If one is still in cyclic existence, there will be an arisal of another birth, which isn't that kind of blissful concentration state. There will be an arisal of something that is something other than that peak of cyclic existence. And this is the problem that Buddha had with just achieving states of high samadhi and not coupling it with wisdom. The Buddha recognized that this suppression was only a temporary suppression, and that the only way to have a permanent eradication was to apply an antidote to that which is giving rise to the whole situation over and over and over again, to the feelings of pleasure and pain that are contaminated in either way or suffering if we analyze them within cyclic existence. And this is something that is very, very rare to find. Usually in the world, we have billboards we drive by, and we look at the television, and there is, 7,000 ways that everyone will convince you to achieve happiness in this life. And that there's everything around us is trying to convince us. I don't know if it's trying to purposefully convince us, but it convinces us that we're here for good, and we better find out what our thing is in this life, or our life, and what our hobby is. And, just find your passion. And somehow this finding of our passion is, why are we trying to do this? So that we can figure out how to be content, so that we can be peaceful, so we can be happy, so we can be more reliable, so we can care for others more, so we don't have this kind of distracted feeling all of the time. That keeps us from feeling the best that we possibly can. So the world is telling us that we can achieve something that we can't. The world is telling us that everything, all of these splendors, all of these casinos, all of these fireworks, all of these concerts, and all of these art shows, and all of these things the world is telling us this is what matters the most. This is what matters the most. And, to common appearances, if the Buddha hadn't come around and we were nihilists and we said, this is all you get, can't see it, isn't here. I don't see a past or future life. All I can see is what's in front of me. So that's all that matters. So if Buddha hadn't come around and nihilism was the actual accurate truth, then this would make sense. It would make sense to just focus on this life, find the most peak amount of pleasure we can find in this life. I can give you some suggestions. If you need some new ones, go for it. And you're going to find that it's all salt water. And the thing that the worldly view doesn't tell us is that part. They, differentiate between things that we shouldn't do that make us happy, but these things we should do that make us happy. It's okay to do this, but not okay to do that. But the facts that remain is that none of these things, if they're about trying to make this life better at an ultimate level, like really, like I just don't want any more pain. I want to be as happy as I possibly can, and I don't want this happiness to end. I don't want that car to rust. I don't want that relationship to end with, some sort of disharmony or separation because of death. But none of that's not realistic. That's not realistic. Everything that we're being told will work doesn't work. And if it doesn't have imbued with it this idea that this doesn't work, then there's a constant dissatisfaction. But renunciation's about stopping the dissatisfaction, because now okay, you have some intelligence around the things that you're coming in contact with. And you're realizing that the value you're giving them isn't accurate. It isn't right because of the fact of this constant changing state of everything. This, we see coarse impermanence, this separation that's, going to happen. But we don't even look at this subtle impermanence. This, we're moving so quickly every moment towards our death. We're dying every moment. The person we love next to us is dying every moment. So there's nothing that could possibly occur but sadness between this connection at the end of the day. And that's what Buddha came to tell us and remind us of. And then when we say, okay, well, the world tells me that finding my soulmate is the thing that could make me the happiest in the world. Forget all the material things. I need this soulmate. But then the Buddha says there's this suffering of change, that this suffering of separation that's bound to occur. So we have to be realistic and start to seek out things that really work. And that's what the Buddha was so kind to show us. It wasn't coming to just kind of be, the downer in the room. The Buddha came to be the person who was exhilarated and excited in the room to let everybody know, hey, right now we think we're all at a birthday party, but this birth is caused death. The fact that you were born, you started dying and moving quickly towards what? And then we look at the sufferings. What am I moving quickly towards? Okay, big deal. I'm moving quickly towards something. And this quickly towards something, if we look at the course level, okay, one day I'm going to die. Okay, I was born and then I die. But there's this kind of moving so fast towards it that I'm just not paying any attention to. And while that's moving so fast, I'm trying to fill in these gaps with some sort of monkey business. And I say monkey business because, like Ani Tupten Chodron talked about the monkey mind, and everyone talks about the monkey mind. It's just, monkey business. My monkey mind, we look at the karma and the wheel of life, the swinging from one branch to another, this monkey just swinging from one branch to another, oblivious that there's this thing going on. And all the while this swinging's going on and this one branch to another, actions and actions and actions, all the while that this is going on. I'm sorry, this is the consciousness. The potter is the one who's engaging in actions, but the consciousness is all the while moving on, and oblivious to the fact that the state of dissatisfaction isn't necessary. So it's not necessary to feel bad. It's not necessary to be not at peace. It's not necessary to be sad. It's not necessary to have love and sadness somehow connected. You love someone, so you see they're in pain and now you're sad. The Buddha can love everyone and see all their pain and not be sad. and be more effective because of this. Be so effective because of the self-grasping ignorance. It's now about you and not me. So how do I help instead of being sad that something's going on I don't like to see? We have to take a look at why we become sad a lot of times. Why in life? Is it really about the person's suffering that we're saying to ourselves, oh, they're undergoing the suffering of sickness. This is something that we all undergo. This is because they're in cyclic existence. Are we looking at it like that? Or are we looking at it in terms of, oh, will they leave us? Oh, well, how is this going to be moving forward in terms of my relationship with this person as they're sicker or if they pass away? What are we really thinking about? We're thinking about ourselves and then saying, there's some sort of grasping, this, or, and Lama Tsongkhapa says we perceive phenomena and then we grasp itself. So we could reverse it too. It's always good to look at it all the different ways that our mind kind of is affected by circumstances. But here we are today looking at complicated material, but complicated material doesn't become more complicated by looking at it over and over again. It becomes easier. And that's what Shantideva had to tell us, that nothing becomes harder through familiarization. So we can look at these things and, this year we take this from it and somehow help change our lives for the better with what we could handle this year. And then we read it again and it's like, sometimes like somebody came and changed the words in our text as if sometimes if we read the Lamrim Chemo multiple times, we'll see so many things each time that you'd swear you never saw before. Like there's no way I read this before. And, and if you've read it 10 times, every single time you go through the Lamrim Chemo, you find some detail or some piece of information that is some new piece of the puzzle that helps undo the self-grasping ignorance and we always talk about the self-grasping ignorance, but undo the ignorance of karma and its results. Because really, we wouldn't, if we were thinking right, as Shantideva says, the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, we'd be day and night trying to not do non-virtue, because that's what gives rise to all of our woe. So this is kind of another way to look at renunciation, because the Buddha said, abandon evil. And that's related to renunciation when we look at that commentary on that. Abandon evil, engage in perfect virtues, subdue your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Abandon evil. We see Shantideva says, day and night I should be figuring out how to abandon evil, because it's the cause of all of my woes. All of this kind of non-virtue. And then the Buddha says we engage in perfect virtuous actions. The way that we could engage in a perfect virtuous action is to cherish others more than ourselves, and that kind of virtue. And it's really amazing that we have the ingredients to put those two ripening paths together in our minds that can then couple with the wisdom realizing emptiness that could truly subdue our mind, get our minds calm enough, become ethical enough, and our minds calm enough, and our minds wise enough to be able to see emptiness directly, that could actually serve as a liberating path, that could cut this root of ignorance. And once we cut this root of ignorance, that action, the potter, and that consciousness going from life to life to life with these seeds we've planted that give rise to concordant results and environmental results and behavioral results and all of these different types of things that happen because of the actions we're engaging in now, because of the things that we're doing with our body and our speech and the ways that we're thinking. We're constantly creating more samsara. And the whole trick here in Buddhism is to stop creating samsara and start creating Buddhahood. That's it. We in our daily lives have a decision that we can make in each moment. Would you like more of what we're going to talk about today? More bodies, more rebirths, more uncertainty, more insatiability, more bodies, that you shuck off and then have another one. Here I am again, and you think it's you. not having folks to be with us as we're going through high and low realms, all of these types of suffering. And we have a way out. So imagine that you bring all sentient beings here to be able to share in this gift that the Buddha came to give us. And that's the gift to learn how to actually get rid of suffering forever and how to have the most infinite happiness, have the most expansive mind in the universe. So share this gift with all sentient beings. Bring all beings here, hell, hungry, ghost, animal, human, demigods, and gods, bringing them here in accordance with the descriptions in the Lam Rim, and thinking about their various types of suffering, and thinking about wanting their various sufferings to go away and wanting them to be able to have the most infinite amount of happiness possible. And that you're bringing these sentient beings somewhere where the recipe's being given for that state of Buddhahood, where one is woken up and no longer has the afflictive obstructions or obstructions to omniscience. One is able to completely help everybody in the universe, be the most reliable guide because of perfect wisdom, love, power, compassion, skillful means, etc. So leave seeds in your mind. Every moment we have a chance to set some sort of intention, set some sort of habitual pattern within our mind, lay some sort of tracks for future thinking. So here we're laying the tracks for the future thinking of when we're a bodhisattva, or when we're a Buddha. We're laying these tracks in our minds. So we have this mental basis set up that will allow for us to actually want to aspire to be able to connect with every single sentient being in the universe and help to share the truth of suchness with them at their own individual capacity so that they can be liberated. And we'll have more and more capacity to be able to do that, connect to more and more sentient beings as we become more and more skilled. And once we achieve the mind that aspires to enlightenment, and we take the bodhisattva vow, and we're on the path of accumulation, and we're becoming more and more capable because our mind is becoming more refined with the understanding of emptiness inferentially. Our mind is becoming more capable of uniting its calm state with its wise state. The mind is going through this process. We'll need to go through this process of the wisest, kind of calmest place after achieving this mind that wants to work for all sentient beings, and will then be able to then directly perceive emptiness along this pathway. So we're laying the tracks within our mind to be able to produce this kind of state where we become more and more capable because of the refinement of our consciousness as we move from the path of accumulation to the path of preparation, to the path of seeing, to the path of meditation. This refinement of our consciousness conceptually, where we're starting to understand the nature of reality calmly, more and more subtly, and then directly experiencing it, and being able to then have a layer of our kind of distraction removed forever once we've seen emptiness directly, and we become a bodhisattva who can then do more work like we're pretending we're doing right now, do more work where he or she can then emanate bodies that can actually connect with these beings we're imagining we're connecting with now, to teach them the truth of suchness so that they can be free from suffering and have the most infinite happiness possible, so that they can abandon evil, they can engage in perfect virtuous activities, and they can subdue their mind, because we know that the Buddha can't subdue anybody's mind for them, can only teach the truth of suchness, and has to be able to do it in the most skillful way possible. And only a Buddha has the obstructions to omniscience removed and can see conventional truth and ultimate truth simultaneously, and doesn't have any impediments to having the mind be able to know exactly what's the right thing to do for every single sentient being. And the right thing to do for every single sentient being is show them how to achieve the state that the Buddha achieved. So this is what we're trying to make our minds be able to do. Our minds will eventually be perfect, and they can become perfect because we have Buddha nature. If we didn't have Buddha nature, this would be a fairy tale. I'd be telling you to imagine you're trying to do something you could never do. But I'm asking you to imagine doing something that you will do, and you'll be able to do, and you'll be able to do more competently than anyone in the universe that isn't a Buddha. So imagine you bring all hell, hungry, ghost, animal, human, demigods, and gods here as your guest. And imagine that we all get into the 7-point Vairocana posture. You get into the 7-point Vairocana posture, but imagine everyone around you has been inspired by your actions and gets into the 7-point Vairocana posture. We've gone over this many times. I won't go over it. And now begin and imagine that all sentient beings are beginning to start to calm their minds down. And now you focus in on only your mind. Now you're no longer imagining the sentient beings around you. Now start to work only with your mental consciousness, no longer engaging any of the sensory consciousness, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, any of the tactile consciousness or hearing consciousness. We're trying to shut those off and really only working with the mental consciousness itself. And we're going to tell our mental consciousness what to do. So we imagine that everybody's minding their own business. All the sentient beings around us are minding their own minds. And now we focus in on our specific mind. We're telling our mind what to do. And we're going to tell our mind that the only thing we're going to allow it to do, focus on, very clearly and not scatter off it, is breathing in, breathing out, and counting. This is all we're going to allow our minds to focus on. And this should be done in a way that there isn't anything else going on, no scattering or excitement. Nothing's coming off of, nothing's allowing you to jump off of this focal object of breathing in and out and counting. And then also, you don't want to allow yourself to get sleepy and dull. And if you see yourself sinking into any kind of laxity, lethargy, or kind of dullness, dull state, you should have an alarm go off, like a spy in your mind that's called, vigilance or introspection that catches that. And then mindfulness is, remembering what you told your mind to do. That's mindful. I'm being mindful. I told my mind to do this. I'm being mindful of abstaining from non-virtue. I've told my mind to not engage in these things. So now I will try to make my body, by intention, not move in a way that's harmful or speak in a way that is harmful. So mindfulness isn't just for sitting in meditation. It's for remembering what we're supposed to be doing throughout our day. In terms of what our goals are. We want happiness. We want to be free from suffering. And we know that up till now, this self-grasping ignorance has caused us to be in cyclic existence. So we look behind us, we look in front of us, we look at, what's led up to now, and we look at the truth of suffering. We look at the truth of origin of suffering, cessation of suffering, and path. And then we act accordingly within the moment. That's our mindfulness. This is what we're not forgetting to do. We're not forgetting that we want to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So here, mindfulness, moving it back, is not forgetting the focal object of breathing in and out and counting. So let's calm our minds down a little bit so that we can then hear this teaching and we can then move forward with proper motivation. Now, with that same focused mental consciousness, imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni appears in the space in front of you, arm length away, size of your thumb, about eye height, beautiful and radiant, so pleased that you're here, looking into your eyes with such love and compassion. Imagine you feel the warmth of the bliss of Buddha Shakyamuni, just the warmth of Buddha's love and compassion. Just such a different type of being, someone who's removed afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience and no longer has any form of self-cherishing attitude. Is so different. We've experienced holy beings like Khyentse Geshe Wandak in our lives, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We know what beings like that are, how beings like that are. we know they're so different. They have a presence in the room that's so spectacular. So now imagine that the one who came to this world, the one who transformed into a reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher, Sugata, and protector, to you, I make prostrations. Buddha Shakyamuni came to this world 2,600 years ago to teach us exactly how to remove our suffering, teach us how to exactly to experience the most happiness that a mind can experience. And was a reliable guide because he transformed into a being who possessed those qualities. He came to show us exactly how to do it. And here we are today learning what we need to do to be able to achieve the state of Buddhahood and help all sentient beings be free from suffering, the causes of suffering, achieve happiness and the causes of happiness by learning how to do it. And by stopping the ignorance that thinks there's another way. Buddha is so pleased that we're here. And imagine that there's a blissful state that the Buddha is experiencing that causes an eruption in the entire merit field, begins to fill in the space in front of you. So this is all going on in your mind. You're not trying to hallucinate with your sensory consciousness, some sort of an explosion or the merit field being in front of you in terms of your visual consciousness. You're trying to experience it with your mental consciousness. So we try to get better and better and better at visualization and holding objects and so forth, and leaving the imprints in our mind of these holy beings that we want to connect with in the future. And just hearing the names of these beings creates so much karmic connection with them that we will definitely meet with their teachings in the future if we don't in this lifetime achieve the completion stage. We'll definitely meet with them. So it's so important to have these preliminaries where we saturate our mind with these holy ideas, saturate our minds with the ways and means, the methods that will allow us to actually achieve these goals. Not just information that helps us to transform, to see these instructions for practice within everything that the Buddha taught and how we apply it to each and everything that we're doing. Imagine now the merit field is filling in. His Holiness the Dalai Lama on a throne, supported by 8 snow lions, so solid, on a Vajra. Imagining Kensur Geshe Wanda, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Demo Locha Rinpoche, Kensur Lobsang Jatso, imagine Geshe Dorji Damdu, Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin, Umzala Geshe Aga, Jeffrey Hopkins, Chado Rinpoche, any beings, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, any beings you consider holy beings, Ani Tupten children, any beings you consider holy beings, leaving out none. We're so fortunate beings like Jeffrey Hopkins came in this world and put in so much effort, was so persistent. This is part of his name in Tibetan, persistence. Was so persistent and cared so much for us to be able to understand emptiness and understand that liberating path. And it's beings like this that we want to stay connected to so that we will in all of our lives be able to understand the truth of suchness. And there's so few beings that are handing that nectar out. We should really, really want to be connected to those types of beings and not the ones who hand out the false nectar on the billboards and on the TV. Imagining all the holy beings of the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni and Maitreya and Asanga and Vasubandhu and Dignaga and Dharmakirti and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha and Lama Salingpa and Atisha. Imagining all the holy beings of the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nagarjuna and Buddhapalita and Aryadeva and Shantideva and Chandrakirti and Baba Vega and Chandrashita and Kamalashila and Lama Salimpa again and Lord Atisha. Imagining the beings of the lineage of blessings passed down from Buddha Vajradhara to Saraha and Matripa to Lopa Naropa, Lotsawa Marpa, Milarepa, Jetsun Milarepa, and Gampopa. All these holy beings, imagining that Lama Atisha is passing down the Lamrim lineage to Drone Tompa, that incredible Lama. Imagining the old Kadampa lineages, the three old Kadampa lineages, imagining the holy beings of the Nyingma, Padmasambhava, Sakya, Sakya Pandita, Sakya Kunganimpo, the Kaju Karmapa is imagining the holy beings of the Galupa lineage, Lama Tsongkhapa, Kirtap J, Joseph J, Basuchiji Jetson, Panchen Sonandrapa, Jayan Sheba, Gonja Jimmy Wambo, Jayan Rupi Dorje, imagining the seventh Dalai Lama, Jitsumba, Pubajok, all of these holy beings that came to elucidate the meaning of these texts. We're so fortunate. Imagining the highest Yoga Tantra deities, performance Tantra deities, action Tantra deities. The 35 Buddhas, all the protector deities. Just sit with this visualization for a moment. Imagining that every single sentient being that isn't a Buddha in the universe is here to be able to be blessed and hear the teachings given by these holy beings who are enlightened in the space in front of you. And that know that none of the teachings that are given today can't be found in the teachings of those holy beings, texts that we just mentioned. We know that we can count on this pure lineage that goes all the way back to Buddha Shakyamuni. Through all these incredible lineages that we're part of, that are passed down to us by our holy lamas. This is our spiritual family. A sigh of relief that we have this family that's so realized, that cares for us and protects us, not only in this life, but in our future lives. And by connecting to them, by leaving these imprints in our mind, we're leaving these imprints, we're in these moments that will connect in the future to just this information. Our behavior will connect to this, will ripen into, will be born in a place where we'll connect to this kind of information. We'll have access to it. We know that we could have a human basis that doesn't really so great in terms of meeting with the Dharma. And getting a human basis is so hard. But we can, because we're planting these kinds of seeds and these pure aspirations within our mind, and we're learning how we would kind of want our mind to be at death, we're making it possible to really have the most conducive states in our future lives. When we look at the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, they're there because we don't get this exactly the way we want, where we no longer suffer again and have only happiness in this life. That's a very small hole of a needle to thread. If we don't make it, we're going to want to have done exactly what we need to do so that when we're ejected into a place where we meet with these teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni and the Nalanda Pandits, and in the future, we meet with Lord Maitreya, if we haven't figured it out by then. We want to make sure we're connecting. We hear Maitreya's name in the extensive deeds lineage and Manjushri's name. And these are our holy beings. Asanga met with Maitreya. Lama Tsongkhapa met with Manjushri. So many beings have met with these holy beings. And our lineage is so blessed by direct encounters by beings like Tara and Manjushri, Maitreya. What would that be like if we were somehow in this huge world field and we were able to have a mind big enough to have all of these beings we love, we put their needs before our own, and we see how happy that makes us, like a parent experiencing that bliss of love of a child. We have this like world space where we have all these beings we care so much about, and all of the solutions are right in front of us. All of the holy beings, the warmth of the love and compassion, the wisdom, this union of method and wisdom that they've figured out. All these enlightened beings can cognize everything simultaneously. They're here with us right now. And now we have another sigh of relief because we're going to recite the Heart Sutra. And the Heart Sutra shows us how to undo the self-grasping ignorance that's the root of all of our problems. If we can figure out how to get rid of these elaborations, this self-grasping ignorance that grasps at I and phenomena as being truly existent and then says, oh, I matter more than you. There's a basis for me to matter more than you. So this is what we have to try to figure out how to get rid of. And the Buddha said that this is the key. If we get rid of the self-grasping ignorance and the self-cherishing attitude, we can become, at all of its levels, we can be a Buddha. And a Buddha only experiences a freedom from suffering forever and bliss forever. So this information that we're about to read is the most, powerful information in terms of truth that we can express, because it's expressing the exact nature of reality. And it's talking about all phenomena. It's not missing any part of reality whatsoever. And normally, we have the exact opposite of what this is presented in our minds, unless we're, noble beings who are apprehending things or saying, oh, I don't believe you anymore or something, or have had some kinds of experiences. Normally, we're apprehending everything around us in the exact opposite way of this Heart Sutra, and the reverse, the reverse of what it means. That's what we believe. Just take what it says, reverse it, and that's how we live our lives. And because we think in the direct opposition all of the time, even sensory, we are, having this appearance of things being the opposite of what this text says they abide, the reality of their, subsistence, how they are. So this is major antidote. And this is why it's so powerful to just even recite it. This is why you see people recite it sometimes 100,000 times, because of the power of these words, the power of the truth. Normally we're saying blah, 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 no truth in it whatsoever. And here we have a moment to just only say truth, only truth that's in the reverse of what we normally think and apprehend in terms of our appearance, our experiences. So this is giving us a reverse. This is like saying to you, here's an earthquake for your mind. As Arya Davis says, someone who even, most people with little merit won't even have a doubt. Meaning, like, if you have to have a lot of merit to say, wait a second, are things inherently existent? You have to have tons of merit to even say, wait, maybe they're not. Not even, oh, I don't think things are inherently existent. Arya Davis says, if you think just for a moment, wait a minute, are appearances tallying with reality? Just to wait, I don't think wait for a moment, just that moment of doubt. It says it tears samsara to pieces. It creates like a kind of a shakeup in everything around. So we can see how subtle this information is and why you need, if you don't have an extreme amount of merit, you won't even come to a point where you might doubt this. And you wonder why there aren't people flocking to Buddha's teachings. You need an enormous amount of merit to doubt it. Just to even come to the point of doubt, where it says, oh, well, I think things are inherently existent, but maybe they're not. They're probably inherently existent, but maybe they're not. Or I'm not sure if they are or they aren't. Oh, they're probably not inherently existent. Even if you start out at that point where you say, things are probably inherently existent, but I'm not sure. I'm leaning towards them being inherently existent, but there's something in me that's saying I'm not sure. That takes an enormous amount of merit to have just that right there. So just think of that fleeting idea. I'm not sure if it is. And then what it takes to stick here every week after week, or every day after day, looking at a book, looking at a book, looking at a book. If just having that one little doubt takes an enormous amount of merit. So just feel yourself so blessed, because I know so many of you are, so many years have looked at this material, care so much about this material, want to change your mind, see the value of this material, and know how rare of an opportunity it is. And not, to try to, it's almost like a moment of rejoicing. Give it to yourself. that you have enough merit to be able to, week after week, month after month, year after year, care whether or not things inherently exist. You must, because we keep reading this. Some of you I've seen for decades reading this over and over again. And we're still saying, form is emptiness. Emptiness also is form. Okay, we have an entity. We have different isolates. We're still trying, decades later, still grappling with this thing that we need to reverse in our minds to think like it says here. And we still haven't reversed it enough to know that we, have figured out how to stop exaggerating our need to cherish ourselves and exaggerating the things that we want. We have all come to enough of a conclusion to see that this is an antidote, but know that it's a hard final conclusion to come to. And that's so beautiful. That's the doubt that Arya Dev is talking about. It's not this cocksuredness that happens overnight about, the way things appear to me, that's just not right. And I'm just going to think they're appearing wrong from now on. I'm going to think that this is the way that I should think they appear. And it's a few sentences. I should think they appear by mere imputation and dependence upon a collection. What's the collection? Some causes and conditions, collections and parts. Okay, all right. That don't have any character from their own side. Just merely that. I should be able to then walk around. Heart Sutra's coming. I should be able to walk around and think like it says in this Heart Sutra, that none of this stuff that I'm thinking is inherently existent is. There's no nature from its own side. I should walk around thinking like this. If just some syllogisms in my life is all I need. But there's something more peculiar about self-grasping ignorance. There's something so peculiar about some simple facts that are 100% accurate when you start to say, is it inherently from self or other? If it's not, within the parts or outside the parts, then it can't be inherently existent because these are the only opportunities for it to be. Boy, am I important. It's incredible how many layers have to be taken down. But I think those of you who have meditated on emptiness over the years a little, tried to not be too shabby with it, as some Kappa says, I think you start to see that the belief lessens a little bit, and you start to catch yourself buying into the story quicker. You don't stop believing the story, but you're buying into the story less as receptively. You're not quite as receptive. You're just not quite as open of a vessel to kind of the BS that you're convinced yourself up to, put in the date when you started learning about Buddhism. Something happened, something happened to you folks. You had to have been poisoned by some sort of truth because you're still sitting here. Rinpoche was wonderful and great, and he said great and wonderful things, but you're still sitting here. For some reason, hearing what he said, and it's not a whole lot different, but for some reason, we're still trying to figure out how to make our minds work like it all day and night. But I think that some of yours have started to a little more than they did 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. And I think that if they didn't, you wouldn't be here still. So I just want to rejoice in the fact that I know when you look around and you see Buddhists still around, and you see people still going to teachings and trying to figure it out and discussing things we were discussing in 98 or whenever, 90s, there's some conviction that's taken place that boredom didn't set in. Why didn't boredom set in? Because it's right. It's truth. It's something that, how could you be bored with something that's just so illuminating? So we're really fortunate. So we brought all beings here as our guests, and I'll just, for auspicious reasons, recite this, and then we'll recite the Heart Sutra. In the language of gods, nagas, and yaksas, in the language of demons and humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. If I read the Heart Sutra in English, if I don't say this, we got a problem. I just invited everybody here. We're going to need translators. Oh, man, and don't bring up translation. I just start to sweat when I even hear it. Lai ke da lu da no jin ke zhu bun da da mi ke nan dan zhuo wa gun ji zhuo nan ji zang pa dan che ke du da ji chu ten do. You have to have fun with this. You have to be able to stay light while trying to hold on for dear life, because it'll be too much if you don't. If you don't somehow keep a sense of lightness about all of this stuff, it'll be too much. Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. We're going to say some truth. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha monks and a great gathering of the Sangha Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness. Emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu, up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind conscious dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate buddhi soha. 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 Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son and noble family, thus it is. O son and noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught. And all the Tathagatas were rejoiced when the Blessed Ones had said this. Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Kala jube ne jo damba ne nguje do ju ngai tu do jen tru babo lama yi bu shinzi ne zon dan ro so la ja zelo agasamara jasandara samara be agasamara. Aga samara jasandara samara be de aton kati kati parakati prasangati bedi so papa ko sunji kai tembe doji she lobo doji mepo doji shewa doji dragi bachi meto bishu danji shedengo yezo geri endon ja je je wa da me don ne be jan dan wa da tumba jan jin bon zon zon joji daji de jan de no de le jo. A request for teaching. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. There is grasping, you do not have the view. Okay. So we have been looking at this section on the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity for quite some time now, because we're trying to go through it slowly, as Khenser Geshe Wandak taught us to do, and look at the details and see where we can find other details that are interesting, that will help us to understand more of what the Buddha was trying to present. And so now we're looking at the 6 types of suffering. So as we know, we've been very careful to go over the different 4 categories of the text: the greatness of the teaching's author, the greatness of the teaching, how to listen to and explain the instructions, and then how to lead students through the actual instructions. So we've been careful to go through this text in this way to be able to make sure that we cover everything in detail. So we went through those first 3 categories, and then we get into the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. And we've gone over the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, which show us how to get out of the lower realms of cyclic existence in our future life, how to have a good future life, how to have high status in the future, as we find in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, and the 16 behaviors, virtuous behaviors, that we engage in for gaining such a high status that would have the attributes that we want, as we were talking about before, trying to make sure that we're creating, if we don't achieve nirvana in this life, an abiding or a non-abiding nirvana, that we are set up in our future life in such a way that we know we have nothing to worry about. And when these Kadampa masters say, at the time of death, I have no regrets, that means that they know they're fully prepared. It's not, I have no regrets. They never did anything wrong in their whole life. That's not it. We all have this, self-grasping ignorance that, misperceives everything around us. So we're going to act in ways that are negative. But if the more and more we familiarize our mind with the truth of reality, then at the time of death, we'll know that our mind is saturated with that what it'll need to be ejected into somewhere we'd like to be, as opposed to all of the other options. And when we study samsara well, we find out that it's not just a few. There are so many innumerable options of places that we can be born into, and then we just don't really analyze it well enough. And in the small scope, we learn about these lower realms, one of which we can see with our eyes, the animals, but we learn about these lower realms. And then we get to this medium scope, and we see that even though we need to create everything to try to have a good potential future rebirth, that's still within samsara, no matter where we get, no matter how high the status is, we're still within cyclic existence and have among the various types of 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, and 3 types of suffering. So the small scope leads us up to the point where we say, hey, I want to do better, be good, do, as good, or, have a good situation in my next life. But then the medium scope says, hey, life, when you're saying it like this, is referring to samsara. And samsara is a problem no matter what. And let me tell you why. And the Buddha identifies the truth of suffering for us. And that's where we are. We looked at the 8 types of suffering to be able to identify them, to have our minds be more realistic around what our actual current state is, as opposed to the delusional current state that we create that doesn't tally with reality. We think happiness, we think that, happiness is, we think that, something that is actually suffering is a form of happiness. We think that things that are impermanent are permanent. We have all of these misconceptions day and night that are driving us, that are leading us by the nose into trouble, into jail. We would say in our ordinary conventional world, I don't want to go to jail, so I don't engage in things that, maybe I want to, but I can't, because I could go to jail. Maybe I want all the money in the bank, but I don't do that. I don't go rob the bank because there's consequences. And when we look at it in those terms, this is just broadening our perspective. Like, I don't tell the lie because I want to be trusted in my future life. I want people to believe in what I'm saying in my future life. So I don't want to bear the consequences of doing the wrong thing. Just like in this life, even though I would like to do some things, there's consequences that I'm not willing to bear. And when we identify the truth of suffering, we start to ask ourselves, are you willing to bear these consequences? Are you willing to have these things happen again and again and again? And if you are, go do all the things that you are doing. But if you're not willing to bear that, if you're not willing to bear the consequences of things in this life you'd like to do, but you don't because it'll cause you a problem, apply that same intelligence to the first noble truth and the second noble truth and say, I don't want to create, if suffering's a result and all results depend upon their causes, I don't want to create that. I'm not willing to pay that price. And that's the beginning of the epiphany. I'm not willing to pay that price. I'm just not. And then you can come to find out that you don't have to, and that you get a deal that's incredible if you want it. So it's not a struggle once you realize that what you're doing is like what you've done your whole life is put in the work and the effort needed to get the result. You've done this your whole life to get degrees, to get jobs, to pay the mortgage, to pay for the rent, to feed yourself. We've done this. We believe in this. We believe in doing the things so that we produce a result we want. We in empirical world, we believe this. So what if it's a little bigger? What if we could just look at our life as all of them? The eye, how old's the eye? Well, how old's the eye? What if we just looked at our life as all of them, and our future life as all of them? What if that was the truth? We'd be making decisions that were more in line with what we would want in the long run. Our long run's too short. Our long run's this life. And if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. It's too small. This is a blip on the radar. It's way too small. We need to be able to expand it while we're fully participating in this life. Because our participation in this life creates our future experience. And if we're not loving and caring and investing in others as a good parent, brother, sister, uncle, cousin, roommate, then we're not creating that which we want in the future. We're not making the causes for the results we want. So we automatically become more of a better engaged person by being a spiritual practitioner. Because we're looking at, I don't want to lie, I don't want to kill, I don't want to steal, I don't want to get adultery, sexual misconduct, I don't want to lie, I don't want to have divisive speech or harsh words or gossip or covet others' things or have harmful intent towards others or these wrong ideas. Imagine how you would participate with others. You say, I'm not attached to this. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. That sounds so rude and just disassociated. No, it's very invested in the long run. And when we look at the Mahayana perspective, it's the long run for everyone. So now you're way more invested in everything around you and everyone around you, plus much further than just what you can see in front of you. That's what this is about. Expanding our way of thinking, making it bigger, making it so that we can actually handle some of these bigger concepts that we're going to need to, and without really coming to terms with what cyclic existence is in terms of identification of the suffering, as all the great texts say. Shantideva says, and even in the Source of All My Good, where it says, having, we know about our own problems, we then think about our mothers who have these problems. So we identify exactly what the problem is that we're having. In the three principal paths, that sentient beings are, in the waves of birth, aging, sickness, and death, tormented by birth, aging, sickness, and death, it says. How would we know that? We know we have to identify it ourselves and know what birth, aging, sickness, and death is. And the person that's closest to us is us. So this is who we can identify the most with. And then when we identify it with the person we can identify the most with, then we say, oh, it's like that for you and you and you and you. And then it starts to kind of be an empathetic situation that then can turn into, oh, I see. You're acting this way because of this. And I'm feeling this way because of that. And we're colliding. You start to be able to really have more ease in your daily life. So we're looking at the 6 types of suffering. We looked at the uncertainty. We don't know where we're going to go. So all these, everything just gets jumbled up and becomes chaos, when we die. And we think we have these relationships that last forever, but it's just not an accurate depiction. Our mind doesn't accurately depict things. We just stay in this day with this permanent idea of being fixed, but the person that we love the most in our life, we may eat in our future life. If we eat meat, we may eat them. If we're eating meat now, we may be eating our great-grandmother. It's just a possibility. Our great-grandmother has passed on, probably in most of our cases. Mine has. And, there's plenty of time in between when she died and now to be a piece of meat in the supermarket sitting there for me to purchase and eat. I don't eat meat, but I'm just trying to give a perspective of the uncertainty of cyclic existence. We'd say Shariputra saw this terrible thing. No, someone went to Stop and Shop and then picked up a piece of meat from the thing, not knowing it was their great-grandmother, and went home and cooked it. This is the uncertainty that starts to rattle our minds a little bit, not like promoting vegetarianism, but this is an example that we can just see when we're walking through the supermarket. We see lobsters. These all sentient beings have been our mothers. And if we look at the maternal line of predecessors we talked about, my mother's mothers, wow, those lobsters and those chicken bones and all the meat, all of the shrimp, all of these things we're looking at and saying, who among you can I be certain wasn't my mother's mother or mother's mother's mother, depending on how old you are right now? How can I identify that flesh isn't the flesh from the reincarnation, a rebirth of my great-grandmother, was reborn as a chicken, reborn as a pig, reborn as a lobster? This is this uncertainty that we're talking about. And then the fault, it says, of insatiability. We're never satisfied. And there's something interesting here. And this is what I'm going to bring up today. Lama Tsongkhapa in this section brings up the fact that we've drank more and more boiling copper, and that we've eaten more filth as a dog and as a pig than would be higher than Mount Meru. And Lama Tsongkhapa uses these quotes in here. It says, you'll be very disenchanted with cyclic existence if you look at what it says in the Alleviating Sorrow text. And it's interesting because Pabunka Rinpoche puts these quotes in the section under the fault of repeated rebirth. So I think it's interesting. So at first I was like, why is it different than what Tsongkhapa says and what Rendawa says? Why is it seeming to shift? And if we look at Pabunka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, and we compare it to Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, when we look at the fault of insatiability, Lama Tsongkhapa quotes a bunch of things. And Pabunka Rinpoche chooses to put those quotes not under the fault of insatiability, because those quotes can be read in 2 ways. So it's so amazing when we look at the Lam Rim. The Lam Rim is supposed to affect our mind. So however we look at it, when we look at it, we were so insatiated that we were actually beings who had to drink copper, and we had to think that boiling copper, we needed more. And we drank more and more and more, and we weren't satisfied. And we ate shit as a pig and as a dog, and we ate more and more and more, and we were never satisfied. And we lost loved ones, and we shed so many tears that would fill up It says the ocean couldn't contain all the tears that we've shed. And we're never satisfied. So Lama Tsongkhapa, the number of heads that have been severed, if they were piled up, would reach the Brahma's realm. So we've had all of these, we thought we had to cut off heads and we weren't satisfied. So we cut off more heads. And we didn't understand things. So we shed so many tears. So Lama Tsongkhapa puts this in the section of insatiability. We were not satisfied. We had to keep doing this over and over and over again. And then the next section is the fault of casting off bodies. And Lama Tsongkhapa does very little with that. And so Sakya Randawa, the same very, very short amount. It just talks about, hey, if you could look at all the bones you cast off, it'd be higher than Mount Meru. And when you go to a cemetery and you look at all of these headstones, don't be so sure though those aren't your bones from a previous life. If the dates work out, don't be so sure that, when you see, maybe you dig up a dinosaur bone. How do you know that wasn't you? Starts to get weird. You go to see a dinosaur. We don't think like, oh, I was a dinosaur. Right? You go to the Peabody Museum or something, and it's like, ooh, look at those creatures that walked around so many billion years ago. We don't think like, was that me? That me? Are those fossils me? When we go to museums and we look at these old artifacts and stuff, was that me? Is that skeleton, like the skeleton, the mother holding the baby they found the remains of intact, kind of? Was that my mother holding me? Was that me? This is what we start to think about, casting off bodies. And then the fault of repeated rebirth. Tsongkhapa chooses to talk about, and also in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, so does Pabunka. He quotes this, but then he just loads the rest of it with what Tsongkhapa puts under fault of insatiability. Really interesting. And it works from a meditation perspective, because I did it both ways, where you're drinking more copper because you're not satisfied and you think you need more copper to drink in hell. Or you're in this hell and you have this repeated rebirth. You're in this hell. You're a dog. You're a pig. It's very interesting to see how you can take these Lam Rim meditations and adapt them to the quotes to the varying points of the Lam Rim meditation. So Tsongkhapa chooses to look at, if you look for the limit of mothers by counting with earthen pellets, the size of juniper berries, the earth would not suffice. So Tsongkhapa says, if you took a pellet, if you had a pile of pellets bigger than the earth, you'd have to somewhere, and you started going, okay, my mother's mother, her mother, her mother, her mother, her mother, her mother, you wouldn't be able to come up with a beginning. Okay, so you see how it says you cannot see the initial cause of even a single effect. So you have this one mother, your result, your birth, and your mother's mother. You see this one result of you, just innumerable things that made that happen. And then you start to say, well, there's some heaven. I'll see my mother and my brother again. And well, then they'd have to see their mother, and they'd have to see their mother. This is a pretty big place. That's just one, like mothers, because your mother's going to want to see her mother. And their mother's going to want, even if you don't know the mother's mother, but your mother's mother is going to want to know the mother's mother. And think about all the distances in time and so forth, and all the causes and conditions and science. Think about it in that way, just to make you happen. And then we start to think about these innumerable births. We think of beginningless time, beginningless consciousness that Dharmakirti presents so well, by the consciousness being consciousness and sense power and breathing and so forth. These identifications of why we can establish previous lives and future lives. So we've been doing this. We're professional dyers. We've done this a lot. And since beginningless time, we've shucked off bodies and we've had this repeated birth. So, excuse me. So we're not even going to compare any longer. We're just going to read straight from Liberation and see how Pabunka Rinpoche deals with this. I think it's great. I love the way he deals with it, actually. Hold on. Okay, so the defect of being reborn again and again. He quotes the friendly letter by Nagarjuna, just like Tsongkhapa, and then just goes for it, Pabunka Rinpoche style. He says, he quotes the text dispelling grief. He says, not even all the waters in the ocean can equal the amount of molten copper that you have had to drink over and over in hell. So he's starting to bring up the quotes that Tsongkhapa brings up in Insatiability, trying to show you were a copper drinker. You were a copper drinker before. Yeah, you weren't satisfied with it, but this part's saying, hey, you were someone who did that. All these births you've had. So Pabunka's pointing out, you were a copper drinker and you were a dog and a pig. It's not saying you weren't satisfied during this part. It's in the sufferings before it, but he's focusing on the rebirth itself here and the attributes of it that are kind of not great. He's trying to say, you've been this, you've been that, you've been this, and trying to show you the details around it that are so varying. You see the varying varieties of cause and effect that made you here in terms of mothers. He's trying to show you the varieties of things that can occur because of the varieties of behaviors and karmas and so forth that we create and have created since beginningless time because of self-grasping ignorance. So it says, in all the past lives when we were reborn in the hells, each of us has drunk more molten copper than all the water contained in the great oceans of the world. But unless we stop the continuous cycle of rebirth and samsara, we will have to drink an even greater amount than we already have. So he's not saying we're not satisfied here. He's saying that we're going to be beings who have to do that again, because we've already done it so much. We drank so much molten copper. In the hell realm, there's molten copper, supposedly. You have to just bear with these ideas that people are drinking instead of water. You know, they need cool water, but imagine if you were out running and you wanted a cold drink and all anyone would hand you is hot water that was so hot that it burned your tongue. Use that. That's fine. You know, like, and then take it a little deeper and imagine there's a realm where that's all they get. You know, you're so thirsty and all you can get is just like someone hands you 12-degree water and says you only have 1 second to drink this, you know, something like this, like you're just burned and not satisfied, something like this feeling. So you've been a being who's had to live in these conditions. So the Pabunka Rinpoche is forcing us to look at the hell realm again, saying, I know we talked about this in the small scope, but Nagarjuna talks about all of this stuff in the 7 types of suffering that deal with the 6 types of suffering in the letter to a friend. So we're going to deal with it a little bit here, and I'm going to bring up the suffering of the lower realms a little bit, just so you remember that's a chance you have. That's somewhere you can go next. You can be ejected into a place where you drink molten copper. Sounds like too much. Ejected into a place where you don't get anything that you know, for some reason or another isn't palatable, even though you need something palatable or potable, or, you know, doesn't quench you. Somehow you're born somewhere. And we see in when I was a kid, I remember seeing all these things about Ethiopia, and there were, you know, no one had water. You know, it's not a far-fetched. No one had water, and they didn't have the resources, and their stomachs. I remember being a kid, and this is something I actually brought. I was brought to yeah, I'll tell the story. I was brought to a priest, not to be exorcised or anything, but just to see about, you know, I don't think it was a priest. I think it was another type of Christianity. It doesn't matter. Christian minister I was brought to discuss faith and to discuss, you know, becoming part of the congregation. My mom was joining a new congregation. It was some sort of interview that took place. I was little. Bear with me with the details here. I'm trying to remember them exactly. But I went into this office and I started hammering questions. I don't know why at the person about why there was this place that seemed so different than where I lived. And it didn't seem like they did anything to deserve that. I was probably in 4th grade, and I just couldn't get gripped with this. I couldn't figure out, like, were these human beings? Like, I was a little kid. These are human beings like me that live like this? Why? And there wasn't a good answer. So here I am. But there wasn't it was really poorly answered at the time. And I could tell, it's pretty bad when you're, 10, 8, and somebody with such authority gives you such a poor answer. And it sat with me ever since then, the poor answer. Well, it's because, some sort of element of they have to have faith was brought up. Then they just lost me, and love, this loving being who somehow created this intense amount of suffering so that they could then generate faith. But there wasn't a missionary in sight in some of those places. The amount of filth that you've eaten when born as a dog or pig would form as a mass much greater than the size of a king of mountains, Mount Meru. Although the amount of filth each of us has eaten in our past lives as dogs and pigs would create a mountain even greater in size than Mount Meru, we will have to eat an even greater quantity in the future unless we want samsara to end. And they're using filth, they're being nice. It says shit, basically. So it's talking about eating excrement. You want to eat more excrement? Don't do the reversal of the 12 links. Keep them rolling. Keep them rolling in order, and you'll eat more excrement. Not even the oceans could hold all the tears your eyes cried when in samsara realm, when you parted with your friends. In the past, we had to be separated from our parents, children, relatives, and so on. Each of us has cried more tears than all the water contained in great oceans. And unless we can bring an end to our future samsara, we will have to cry even in greater quantity of tears. We're going to be criers again. We don't end this, we're going to be criers again. If all the heads you've severed while doing battle, while piled up, they would rise even higher than the Brahma's realm. We're going to be murderers again. We're going to be reborn and be a murderer again. If someone were to pile up all the heads each of us had severed by our enemies in the past when we were fighting in battles, they would reach higher than Mount Meru, and we are certain to lose even a greater number in the future unless we put an end to samsara's continuous cycle of rebirth. The enemy of the self-grasping attitude, self-cherishing attitude. That's the enemy, Geshe Dorje Damdu said this morning. And as every Lama, banish the one to blame for everything. Right in the Geshe Chikawa's 7-point thought transformation. The self-grasping ignorance that gives rise to the self-cherishing attitude. If you learn your mind to cherish others more than yourself, you won't in the future have enemies to cut the heads off of. Because your mind won't be able to react to beings in any other way than, what's equanimity? Being equally willing to benefit each of them. If your mind was somehow transformed to that kind of state, you'd stop cutting heads off. If all the filth you've eaten, more filth, by the way. It's Pabunga Rinpoche, what do you want? He's very comfortable with speaking in very direct terms. If all the excrement you've eaten in hunger, when you were reborn as a worm, were put in the vast ocean of milk, it would be completely filled. If someone were to deposit in the greater outer ocean all the dirt and filth that each of us has eaten in the lives that we were born as worms living in mud, the ocean would not be able to contain it all. Although we have already eaten much dirt, we will have to consume an even greater amount in the future unless we free ourselves from samsara. So we'll be dirt eaters, worms. It's just getting us to become familiar with the fact that this isn't permanent. We're going somewhere. Do you want to have a broader picture, or do you just want to deal with this now and then have a real problem? Who knows, maybe in an hour. And then he brings up the Nagarjuna quote that's so famous. While everyone has drunk more milk than the 4 oceans, the samsaric person who follows the ways of ordinary beings has far more to still drink. Ordinary beings. Ordinary being versus noble being. An ordinary being hasn't seen emptiness. You don't see emptiness, you're going to drink more. Why? Seeing emptiness is the only liberating path. So you're going to, no matter how much love and compassion and how great you become, If you don't see emptiness, you'll be an ordinary being and you'll drink more of milk and you'll feel more ocean. Like now, you know, I don't know. It's a lot. All of us have taken birth in samsara so many times in the past that we've drunk more milk from our mother's breasts than there is water in the four oceans. But unless we're able to stop samsara's cycle of rebirth, we will have to drink a much greater quantity in the future. Earlier during the instructions for persons of lesser capacity, I explained, so Pabunka Rinpoche is explaining, how to reflect on the fear and suffering that is experienced each time we die and are reborn in the lower states. So anyone who is familiar with liberation in the palm of your hand, if you would like to know what goes on in the lower realms of cyclic existence in great detail, check it out, because Pabunka Rinpoche spares no expense in exactly what happens to each of those beings and how they feel the moment after they feel a certain way they felt. And it's intimidating if you can get to the grips with the fact that you don't know everything and you don't know where everything is and you don't know how everything could be. And the things that in your limited scope that you believed were the only thing to be true even in this life have been blown up. So he's saying that I told you about this. And then, like, if you really want to talk about where you're reborn, and we're going to, get into this, go back to the small scope. So now we see how the Lam Rim is like a circle, and how Pabunka Rinpoche is saying this is a circle. You've got to, okay, now you see the intensity that's building up, that you see the intensity here. Go back and think about it now. This is going to be me in the hell. This is going to be me. You've already supposed to have done that. But Pabunka Rinpoche is saying, do it again. Maybe you haven't done it enough. Maybe you like samsara too much still. But if there is much fear, there is that much fear and suffering in just one death and rebirth, then certainly we'll have to experience a tremendous amount in the countless deaths and rebirths that await us in the future. So if just one of those things can be so terrible, just think of the countless ones that await us if we do nothing. They're all ready. We have all the karmic seeds that are necessary, active, that'll give rise to all these states that they talk about here, or things at least like it that are bad. And then it says, and then I'll end here, Kapche Rinpoche, this is Pabunka Rinpoche. And this is, again, Trijung Rinpoche, Khenser Geshe Wandak's teacher, who wrote down all the stuff Pabunka Rinpoche said. So this is our spiritual lineage, and we have to smile a little bit. And then Pabunka Rinpoche said, he figured Trijung Rinpoche's there. He's at the, Jeffrey Hopkins always does that. Okay, take yourself there, you're there. Pabunka Rinpoche's on this throne. He's teaching tens of thousands of people, lay people, monks, not everyone. He's teaching them. He's talking in very, very direct ways. And Trijung Rinpoche is hearing this. Like, I'm thinking like listening to Khenser Geshe Wandak. It's just like, oh my. He's just trying, he's getting, and Trijung Rinpoche is like already like an incredible scholar. So he's able to really appreciate it. Like really appreciate it. As I learn more, I hear the teachings and they give me the goosebumps. So Trijung Rinpoche is having goosebumps and he's writing all of this down and he's getting it all down. And Pabunka Rinpoche says at the end, you're the only one I trust. Make it a book. And Trijung Rinpoche was Khenser Geshe Wandak's teacher, one of his teachers. A lot of the great Gelugpa Lama's teachers, but amazing when we think about it. So he concludes with the following point. Right now, we are frightened. I love this. And I don't care if it's 12:30, I'm going to read this. Right now, we're frightened at the idea of a scorpion. Okay. Whatever, fill in your frightened of, frightened of snake. When I was a child, terrified, reoccurring nightmares of snakes. Terrified. Even to this day, I'm better with it now, and I purposely move towards the object just to try to deal with it. It's kind of like my one thing that I've got to loosen. It's right in front of me. Forget the hells and stuff. It's right there. I have I get fearful of. And so here I can relate to this. Scorpion, I don't have a lot of scorpions running around. I've seen them. They don't look so scary to me. But for some reason, my karma doesn't like snakes. especially ones that in my dreams as a kid came out of the bathtub thing and rah! For some reason, some karma in my dreams had this snake that came out of at me that carries over to 51. So anyway, kind of funny, really very strange. So it says just the mere sight of a scorpion. So wherever they are, this is bad news, mere sight of a scorpion brings this fear. Yet each of us has actually taken birth as a scorpion so many times that just the bodies from our scorpion rebirths would create a mountain the size of Mount Meru. So I see the snake and I think, all those snake bodies I've had are higher than Mount Everest because I've seen Mount Everest. That's pretty tall. So when I see this being, I mean exactly that being that's terrifying me. So many times that it's higher than Mount Everest, than the snake bodies. If I took all my snake bodies that I thought were Jeff, not Jeff the snake that I grasped at as me. Jeff's not in the picture. That's the part we have to get right with when we think about samsaras. Jeff's out of the picture. Jeff was a snake and thought he was a snake. And the number of times that happened, the bodies of snake bodies, you could pile up higher than Everest. And I see a snake and I'm like, oh, those horrible beings. Yet I've been that being. And then when we see it, Pabuga Rinpoche says when we meditate into the next section, we're in this teaching sharing common with beings of medium capacity. When we get to the great capacity section, we come to say that being who's just like me, I love. I see you as having been so kind to me, and I want to cherish you and take care of you. I don't want to push you away. So you relate by saying, I've been you, like you. And now you know how much suffering that is when you read about the lower realms. And then you want to love that being because you realize how kind they've been to you in the past. It's an evolution of thinking that takes place. And unless we bring samsara's cycle of rebirth to an end, we will have to be born as scorpions and even greater of number of times in the future. So incredible. We have these words to think about that can change our mind, these actual examples that we can see our fears in our life. And we have, beings that scare us, or, even someone we think's creepy. We've been creepy. We've done all those horrifying things. It says we've cut off heads. We've been like Jeffrey Dahmers. Say it like that. You put people in freezers and ate them, molested them. How does that feel? Do you want to be that again? Because you will. You have the capacity to be just like Jeffrey Dahmer's was. We can say cut off heads, but then think about what somebody we know did some really disgusting, terrible things. And know we've done those things so many times that we could pile our Jeffrey Dahmer's like bodies up and they'd be higher than a mountain. Then we can empathize with people in a real way. It's easy to think about like we were knights or something. Think about we were disgusting creatures, and we can be disgusting creatures again. And we don't have to look too far. Turn the news on. Think about the terrorism that goes on. Think about people who are kidnapped and tortured and abused. We've been torturers. We've been abusers. They're doing it because of self-grasping ignorance, just like we were. We're just not doing it right now, but we will do it again. Why? Because most ordinary beings are involved in the ignoble. Therefore, most ordinary beings go to the lower realm. So you're habituated with ignoble things, according to Arya Deva for the most part. So we have more. If most ordinary beings do that, and we're ordinary beings because we haven't seen emptiness, since beginningless time, we've been involved with bad, ignoble things that create habitual tendencies in our mind to do them again. We familiarized ourselves with being these horrible monsters. So our mind can be a horrible monster again. And we've got to stop it. That's what this Lam Rim is about. So powerful. When you think about it and you take it out of fairy tale land and you put it, as Rabina Corton says, you put the vomit in the mouth and you taste it, That's samsara. You're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there's grasping, you do not have the view. Prayer for the flourishing of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. Though he's the father, producer of all conquerors, as a conqueror's son, he produced the thought of upholding the conqueror's dharma in infinite worlds. Through this truth, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. When in the presence of Buddha and Nikita, he made his vow, the conqueror and his offspring praised his powerful courage. Through this truth, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. The lineage of pure view and conduct might spread. He offered a white crystal rosary to the sage who gave him a conch and prophesied through this truth. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. His pure view, free of eternity or destruction, his pure meditation cleansed his dark fading and fog, his pure conduct practiced according to the conqueror's orders. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Learned it since he extensively sought out learning, reverent, rightly applying it to himself. Good, dedicating all for the beings in the doctrine. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Though being sure that all scripture is definitive and interpretive without contradiction, advice for one person's practice, he stopped all misconduct. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Listening to the explanation of the three Pitakas' realized teachings, practicing of the three highest higher trainings, his skilled and accomplished life story is amazing. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Outwardly calmed and subdued by the hearer's conduct, inwardly trusting in the two stages practice, he allied without clash the good paths of Sutra and Tantra. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Combining voidness explained as the causal vehicle with great bliss achieved by the method, the effect vehicle, hard essence of 80,000 Dharma bundles. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. By the power of the ocean of oath-bound doctrine protectors, like the main guardians of the three beings' paths, the quick-acting Lord, Vaishravana, Karmayana, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. In short, by the lasting of glorious gurus' lives and the earth, by the earth being full of good, learned, reverend holders of the teaching, and by the increase of the power of its patrons, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. You see why this doesn't take off in terms of worldview when you look at what we're really presenting here, you know, how it's so hard. And we talk about degenerate times, and we see it wasn't as obvious to me before. It was like, oh, we have all this Dharma around and everything. And then it's 25 years later, and it really, not as many people as I saw around it had it able to sink in. Even though it's everywhere, it's just not sinking in or something. So we feel so fortunate if it is. Concluding mandal offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. May any mistakes that I've made be purified by the mantra of Vajrasattva, seeing Vajrasattva is inseparable from your root Lama, imagining light rays and nectars are showering down on you and all sentient beings, and transforming your impure body, speech, and mind into pure body, speech, and mind by having all of these light rays and nectars transform into white ohms, red ahs, blue homs, that then do that purification. Om Mezasata Samaya Manipulai Benzasata Sinamajida Dita Meva Zulukai Meva Zubukai Meva Anurag Meva Zavazini Meva Jazava comes into Megajam Shriam Guru Ma, Bhagavan Tataka Benzamami Mogamizaba Mazamaya Zaba Om Fe. We always be protected by Paul the Lama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jikala Rama Jidajin Jor Long Jong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jikala Rama Jidajin Jor Long Jong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jikala Rama Jidajin Jor Long Jong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jikala Rama Jidajin Jor Long Jong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jikala Rama Jidajin Jor Long Jong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jikala Rama Jidajin Jor Long Jong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Jo Rama Jo Jo Kala Raja Mo Rama Jidajin Jo Rilu Jo. Any obstacles you're having to meeting with the Dharma or practicing the Dharma, may they be removed by the mantra of Drapu Sunjit, three wrathful protectors. Om Vajrapani Hari Agriva Garudo Om Ve. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised is supreme by the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land, surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara's end. May His Holiness the Dalai Lama remain for much, much longer in this world, and may we always continue to meet with him in all of our lives. Prayer of supplication to Kensur Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Kensei Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Arya Tara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om, 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like a teacher who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. Teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears and elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now the sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness in treating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truths of suchness that beings are liberators. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. Sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives. Wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns, may all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness so they know who you really are. Thank you, everyone. Sorry I went a little over. I hope you can practice these teachings on a daily basis. Have a wonderful day.